The cage smelled like rust and urine and something older, something that had soaked into the iron bars over years of bodies pressing against them. Ilara's fingers were numb where they gripped the crossbar above her head, keeping herself upright, because the floor of the cage was wet with things she refused to think about. Her left eye had swollen shut 3 fights ago, and the cut above her brow had crusted over with a dark scab that cracked every time she blinked. Around her, the fighting pits of Holven roared. The sound came from everywhere, from the tiered wooden galleries stacked crooked as rotten teeth above the sand floor, from the betting callers who screamed odds in voices shredded raw, from the wolves in the other cages, some in human form, and some, not all of them, slamming against their bars in a rhythm that matched the fight happening 30 feet away. 2 wolves, both feral, both drugged with black root to make them vicious and stupid. One of them was missing an ear. The other was bleeding from its belly, a long slash that left a dark trail in the sand every time it circled. Ilara looked away. She had been here 11 days. She knew because she counted the times they threw stale bread through the bars, and it had been 11 pieces. Before that, she had been in the cellar of the Greymore pack house, scrubbing blood-stains out of the Alpha's conference table. Before that, she had been in the kitchen. Before that, the garden. She had been passed through every unwanted task the Greymore pack could find for an Omega, with no wolf, no family, and no one who would notice if she disappeared. And then she had disappeared. Kalen the Greymore Beta had sold her for 1 silver coin. She knew the exact amount, because he had held it up in front of her face, turning it so it caught the lantern light, and said, "That is what you are worth, girl. 1 coin." And honestly, I think I overcharged them. The pitmaster, a squat man named Derry, with a neck like a bull and yellowed teeth, had laughed at that. He had looked at Ilara the way a butcher looks at a cut of meat that might not be worth the effort of trimming. Then he had shrugged and said she would last 2 fights, maybe 3. Wolves liked easy kills between the main bouts, got the crowd warmed up. But Ilara had lasted 11 days. She did not know why. In her first fight, they had shoved her into the sand against a wolf, twice her size, a scarred male with milky eyes who lunged at her throat before the gate had even finished opening. She had dodged. Not gracefully. She had tripped sideways and fallen, and his jaws had closed on air where her neck had been. The crowd had laughed. But then he lunged again, and she rolled, and something had happened that she could not explain. Her hand had come up and pressed flat against the wolf's chest, and there had been a pulse. Not a sound. Not a light. Just a pulse, like a second heartbeat, pushing outward from her palm, and the wolf had stumbled backward and sat down hard on its haunches, blinking confused, suddenly docile as a pup. The crowd had gone silent. Derry had stared from the gallery rail, his yellow teeth bared in something that was not quite a smile. After that, they did not put her in easy warm-up fights. They put her in the special ones, the ones where the betting ran highest, because no one could figure out how a wolfless Omega kept surviving. She became the pit's curiosity, their little freak show. The bruises and the swollen eye were from the fights she could not stop with that strange pulse, which was most of them. The pulse came and went as it pleased, like a muscle she did not know how to flex, and when it did not come, she simply took the beating until Derry's handlers pulled the wolf off her before it killed her. She was worth more alive. A dead curiosity was just a dead Omega. The bread they threw her tasted like sawdust and salt. She ate every crumb. Now she pressed her forehead against the cold iron bar and breathed through her mouth, because the cage to her left held a wolf who had soiled himself in his sleep, and no one had cleaned it. Her ribs ached. Her wrists were rubbed raw by the shackles they put on her between fights, rough iron cuffs that left her skin looking like ground meat. She was so thin she could count her ribs by touch, each one a ridge beneath skin that had gone the color of old parchment. She was going to die here. She had accepted that 4 days ago, somewhere between the fight with the wolf who had bitten through her forearm and the one who had simply sat on her until she could not breathe. She was going to die in the sand in front of strangers who had paid to watch, and no one in the Greymore pack would even hear about it. Kalen would spend his silver coin on cheap wine and forget her name within a month. She closed her good eye and let her forehead rest against the bar. That was when the pits went quiet. Not the gradual quiet of a fight ending, not the lull between bouts. This was sudden, total silence, the kind that falls over a forest when a predator enters. The wolves in the cages stopped their rhythmic slamming. The betting callers choked mid-word. Even the crowd, hundreds of them, packed into the creaking galleries, went still. Ilara opened her eye. The main gate of the pit arena was open. It was a massive thing, oak reinforced with iron bands, wide enough for a cart to pass through. It stood open now, and through it poured torchlight from the street beyond, and in that torchlight stood a figure that made the doorway look small. He was enormous. Not just tall, but built like the fighting wolves, all dense muscle and controlled power, the kind of body that moved with an economy that said, every motion was deliberate because any motion could be lethal. Dark hair cut short at the sides, and longer on top fell across a forehead, marked with a pale scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. His eyes caught the torchlight and threw it back amber. Not brown. Amber. The color of pine resin held up to the sun. He wore black. A long coat of dark leather over a shirt that might have been silk dark trousers, dark boots that were clean, which meant he had not walked here through the mud streets of Holven. He had come by carriage, or by wolf. Either way he had arrived without warning, because Derry was scrambling down from his gallery box with a look on his face, like a rat that has just seen a cat. Behind the man in black stood others, 6, 8, maybe 10, all of them large, all of them radiating the kind of barely leashed violence that marked pack enforcers. Royal pack enforcers. Ilara could see the silver stitching on their collars, the crescent moon insignia that every wolf on the continent knew. The silver crescent pack, the royal pack, the Alpha King's wolves, which meant the man in the doorway was him. Kyle Voss, Alpha King of the Silver Crescent, ruler of the 5 territories. The wolf, they said, had torn out the throat of the last warlord of the northern reaches with his bare hands, because shifting would have been too quick. The wolf, they said, had not taken a Luna in 12 years of rule, because no female had ever made his wolf kneel. He stood in the doorway of a filthy, underground fighting pit in the worst district of Halvan, and he looked at the sand, at the blood, at the cages, at the wolves. His expression didn't change. It didn't have to. The air itself changed. The temperature dropped, or seemed to. Every wolf in the building felt it. Ilara felt it, and she had no wolf. It was authority, pure, vast, and absolute. It pressed down on the room like a physical weight, and in the galleries people began to sink in their seats, shoulders curving inward, chins dropping. The wolves in the cages whimpered. The scarred male, 2 cages down from Ilara, dropped to his belly and pressed his nose to the floor. Derry reached the sand floor, panting, mopping his forehead, with a rag that left streaks of grime on his skin. He was smiling. It was the worst smile Ilara had ever seen. All teeth, no warmth, and the fear behind it so strong she could smell it even through the stench of the cages. "Your Majesty," Derry said, and his voice cracked on the second word. "What an honor! What an unexpected honor! If we had known you were coming, we would have prepared something more, something worthy of your stature. What brings you to our humble establishment?" The Alpha King didn't look at Derry. He was looking at the cages. His eyes moved along the row, passing over the wolves, the filth, the rusted iron. His nostrils flared once, twice. His jaw tightened, and a muscle in his cheek twitched, and the amber of his eyes darkened to something closer to molten bronze. One of his enforcers, a massive woman with cropped silver hair, shifted her weight and placed her hand on the hilt of a blade at her hip. Then the Alpha King's gaze reached Ilara and stopped. Everything stopped. Ilara felt it like a physical blow, like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed her heart. Not painfully, not gently, just completely. A grip that said, "I found you, and now I will never let go." Her skin prickled with heat despite the cold of the cage. The hair on her arms stood up. Her breath caught, and for the first time in 11 days, her lungs filled completely, as if she had been breathing through a straw and someone had just pulled it away. Something stirred inside her. Deep, deep inside, not the strange pulse that came during fights. Something older. Something that had been sleeping so long she had forgotten it existed. It pressed against the inside of her ribs like a creature uncurling from hibernation, and she heard, for just a fraction of a second, a sound that was not a sound. A low, thrumming vibration that she felt in her teeth. A wolf's purr. But she had no wolf. She had never had a wolf. She had been tested at 13 like every pup, and the elders had declared her wolfless, hollow, an omega in the truest, most pitiful sense. And yet. The Alpha King crossed the sand floor in 4 strides. He moved like something between a man and a storm, each step deliberate, his coat flaring behind him, his eyes never leaving hers. Derry scurried after him, still talking his words, tumbling over each other, in a stream of nervous flattery that neither of them heard. The king stopped in front of her cage. Up close, he was terrifying. His face was all hard angles, cheekbones sharp enough to cut that scar, a pale ridge against tanned skin. He smelled like cedar smoke and cold iron, and something underneath that was warm, almost sweet like honey, left too long near a fire. The amber eyes looked at her through the bars, and Ilara saw something in them that she had never seen directed at her in her entire life. Recognition. Not of her face. Not of her name. Something deeper than that. Something that predated language. "Who put you in here?" His voice was low. Not quiet. Low. The kind of voice that does not need volume because it carries weight instead. The kind of voice that vibrates in the chest of everyone who hears it. Ilara stared at him through her one good eye. Her lips were cracked. She had not spoken to another person in 3 days. When she answered, her voice came out as a rasp. "The Greymore Beta sold me. The Pitmaster bought me." The muscle in his jaw tightened again. He turned his head not fully just enough to direct his next words at Derry, who had gone the color of old milk. "How much?" Derry swallowed. "Your Majesty. This female, how much did you pay for her?" 1 silver. Your Majesty. Just 1 silver. She is only an Omega No wolf, barely worth the feed. If you want her, I will of course give her to you freely as a gift, a token of my deep respect for the crown. The Alpha King looked back at Ilara. His eyes moved over her face, the swollen eye, the crusted cut, the hollowed cheeks. They moved to her wrists, the raw, bleeding skin beneath the shackles, to her arms thin as kindling, to the bruises that mapped her body in shades of purple and yellow and green, each one a record of a fight she should not have survived. His hand came up and wrapped around one of the cage bars. The iron groaned. Elara watched her heart pounding in a rhythm she did not recognize, as the bar bent outward under his grip like a green branch. Slowly, deliberately. The iron was as thick as her thumb, and he bent it with one hand, the tendons in his forearm standing out like cables under the leather of his coat. He was not looking at the bar. He was looking at her. "I do not want her as a gift," he said. His voice had dropped lower into a register that Elara felt in her spine. "And I will not insult what was done to her by paying 1 silver. He released the bar. It stayed bent. Then he turned to face Derry fully, and something shifted in his posture. He was no longer a king looking at a curiosity. He was a wolf, looking at prey. "I am buying this arena," he said. "The building, the cages, the sand, the gallery, every contract you hold on every wolf in every cage, the land it sits on, and the tunnel beneath the east wall that you use to smuggle in the black root from the docks." Derry's face drained of what little color it had left. The tunnel was his best-kept secret. Or it had been. Your Majesty? This establishment is my livelihood. It has been in my family for 3 generations. I cannot simply. You misunderstand me. The Alpha King's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I am not negotiating. I am informing you. My Chancellor will have documents drawn by morning. You will sign them. The sum will be more than fair because I am not a thief. But you will sign them. And if I find when my people inspect the records that any wolf in these cages was taken by force, sold without consent, or drugged with black root before a fight, the sum will change to nothing, and you will answer to my court instead of my treasury. He turned back to Elara's cage. "Open it," he said. No one moved for a long, terrible moment. Then Derry fumbled at his belt, producing a ring of iron keys with shaking hands, and rushed to the cage. The lock was stiff. He struggled with it. The Alpha King waited with a stillness that was worse than any display of impatience, a stillness that said he was keeping very, very careful control of himself. And if the lock did not open soon, he would remove it the way he had bent the bar. The lock clicked. The cage door swung open. Elara did not move. She had been in enough cages, in enough bad situations, to know that moving too quickly toward a powerful wolf was the fastest way to trigger an attack response. Her muscles tensed, ready to flinch, ready to duck, ready for the blow that always came after a moment that seemed too good. But the Alpha King didn't reach for her. He did not grab her. He didn't pull her out. He stepped back. He took one full step back from the open cage and stood with his hands at his sides, palms slightly open, and waited. "You can come out when you are ready," he said. "No one will touch you." The silver-haired enforcer behind him drew her blade halfway from its sheath and leveled a look at Derry that said very clearly what would happen to anyone who tried. Elara's fingers released the crossbar. They had been gripping it so long that uncurling them hurt the joints, popping blood rushing back into white fingertips. She took one step toward the open door, then another. The cage floor was slick. Her bare feet slipped, and she caught herself on the edge of the doorframe, and the rough iron bit into her palm. She stepped out onto the sand. It was warm. The sand was warm from the torches, and the bodies above and after, 11 days of cold iron. The warmth under her feet made her eyes sting. She stood there in the open in the sand that had been her battlefield, and she blinked her good eye against the light that was too bright after the dimness of the cage. The Alpha King was watching her. The amber eyes had not moved from her face. Up close, standing in front of him, The scale of him was staggering. The top of her head barely reached his collarbone. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. Not normal body heat. Wolf heat, the kind that ran several degrees above human, the furnace that powered the shift. It washed over her in waves, and that thing inside her, that deep, curled-up thing, pressed harder against her ribs. "What is your name?" he asked. "Ilara. Ilara." He said it like he was tasting the syllables, like he was memorizing the shape of the word. "I am going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Can you do that?" She nodded. She did not trust her voice. "Do you feel it?" She knew what he meant. She knew because the same question was burning in her own chest, the same impossible, terrifying, undeniable pull. The bond. The mate bond. The thing that wolves described as gravity rearranging itself around one person. But she had no wolf. She could not have a mate bond. It was biologically impossible. The elders had tested her. Kaelan had mocked her for it every day for 6 years. "You are hollow," he would say. "Empty. A shell with nothing inside. You will never feel the bond because there is nothing in you to feel it with." "I feel something," she whispered. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile. Something more private than that. Something that was only for her. "Something," he repeated, then softer. "My wolf has been silent for 9 years. 9 years of nothing. No voice, no instinct. Just silence. Healers told me he had gone dormant, that I had been king too long, held too much control, and he had simply retreated." He paused. His eyes burned. "He woke up when I walked through that door. He is howling right now. He has not made a sound in 9 years, and he is howling so loud I can barely think." Ilara's breath hitched. "I do not know how that is possible," she said. "I am wolfless." His gaze held hers, steady, certain. "No," he said. "You are not." Before she could respond, one of the enforcers stepped forward, a lean man with a crooked nose and quick eyes. "Sire, we should move. Word of your presence will spread. Halvan is not secure." The Alpha King nodded, once a short, sharp motion that snapped the room back into order. He shrugged off his leather coat and held it out. Not draped over her shoulders without permission, held it out in his hand for her to take or refuse. Ilara took it. The leather was soft as butter and heavy with his scent, cedar smoke and warm iron, and when she pulled it around her shoulders, the thing inside her ribs purred. Actually purred. She felt the vibration in her sternum. They moved through the arena toward the main gate. The enforcers formed a loose perimeter around them. The crowd in the galleries watched in stunned silence. Derry stood in the sand, his ring of keys dangling from one hand, his face a mask of calculation, as he tried to figure out whether he had just been ruined or enriched. As they passed the last row of cages, a voice called out from behind the bars. A female voice, hoarse and tired. Please take us too." The Alpha King stopped. He looked at the cage at the wolf inside a young female, with matted brown hair and a collar of black iron around her neck. He looked back at the row of cages stretching into the darkness of the arena. 15, 20 cages. Maybe more. He turned to his crooked-nosed enforcer. "Get their names, all of them. Every wolf in this building. I want them fed, watered, and seen by a healer before dawn. No one leaves in a cage. They walk out or they are carried out." Then he looked at Ilara. A look that said, "This is because of you. This is what finding you has done." She did not know what to do with that look, so she pulled his coat tighter and walked out of the fighting pits and into the cold night air of Holvan. The carriage was black and large and pulled by two horses that were not horses. They were too large, too still, their eyes reflecting green in the torchlight. Wolf-bred mounts engineered over centuries by the royal stables. They did not spook. They did not need reins. They responded to the driver's will like extensions of his own body. Inside the carriage, the seats were padded with dark velvet that smelled faintly of leather polish and old wood. Elara sat on one side. The Alpha King sat across from her. The carriage rocked as the driver urged the mounts forward, and they moved through the streets of Halvan, past the taverns and the gambling dens and the narrow alleys where the city's nightlife pressed and heaved. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had too much to say and no idea where to start. Elara's hands were shaking. The adrenaline that had kept her upright in the cage was draining away, leaving behind the pain she had been ignoring. Her ribs ached with every breath. The shackle wounds on her wrists throbbed in time with her heartbeat. Her swollen eye pulsed. She was cold despite his coat, her body too depleted to generate its own warmth. "There is a healer at the stronghold," the Alpha King said. He was watching her hands. "A good one. She can see to your injuries tonight." "Why are you doing this?" Elara asked. Her voice sounded small in the velvet-padded space. "Because you are my mate." He said it simply, without hesitation, without qualification, as if it were a fact on the same order as the sun rising or water running downhill. "I told you. I do not have a wolf. The mate bond requires both wolves to recognize each other. Whatever you felt in there, I cannot be what you think I am." "What I think you are," he said slowly, "is a woman who survived 11 days in fighting pits designed to kill trained warriors. A woman who, according to the intelligence my scouts gathered on the way here, has been documented by Derry's own bookkeeper as having pacified 3 feral wolves with her bare hands. A woman whose Greymore Pack records list her as wolfless, despite the fact that I can feel your wolf pressing against the inside of your skin like a storm behind glass." He leaned forward slightly. "I think you are many things, Elara. Wrong about what you are is one of them." She opened her mouth to argue, closed it, opened it again. "Why were you in Halvan?" "Trade negotiations with the Port Authority. Routine, boring. I was going to leave tomorrow." He paused. "Then about an hour ago, I was sitting at a dinner table with the harbour master, listening to him explain tariff adjustments on grain shipments, and my wolf woke up. After 9 years. He did not whisper. He did not stretch. He hit the inside of my skull like a battering ram and pointed me east. I excused myself from dinner. My enforcers thought I had gone mad. I walked through the streets of Halvan, following a scent I had never smelled before, a scent like night-blooming jasmine and rain on hot stone, and it led me to an underground fighting pit." Elara stared at him. "You left a diplomatic dinner to follow a scent." "I left a diplomatic dinner at a sprint. I believe I knocked over the harbour master's wine." The ghost of a smile crossed her cracked lips. It hurt. But it happened. The stronghold was not what she expected. She had imagined a castle something vast and cold, with stone walls and echoing corridors. Instead, the carriage delivered them to a fortified estate on the northern edge of Halvan, a temporary residence the Crown maintained for royal visits. It was built of dark timber and river stone, 3 stories with warm light pouring from its windows and wood smoke rising from its chimneys. It smelled like pine sap and beeswax, and underneath the distinctive musk of wolves. Not 1 or 2. Many, a pack in residence. The healer was waiting in a ground-floor room with wide windows and a fire burning in a stone hearth. She was an older woman, lean and precise, with steel-grey hair tied back and hands that moved with the efficiency of someone who had been stitching wolves back together for decades. Her name was Thessa. She did not smile when she saw Ilara. She looked at the bruises, the swollen eye, the shackle wounds, and her expression shifted into something flat and professional that was in its own way a kind of fury. "Sit," Thessa said, pointing to a chair near the fire. Ilara sat. The warmth of the fire hit her skin, and she nearly wept. Thessa worked in silence for a long time, cleaning the wounds with a solution that stung like nettles, applying a salve that smelled like calendula, and something sharper medicinal. She splinted 2 fingers on Ilara's left hand that had been broken and had started to heal crooked. She pressed careful hands along her ribs and pronounced 2 cracked, not broken, and wrapped them with bandaging that eased the pain immediately. The Alpha King stood in the doorway. He did not enter the room. He stood with his arms crossed and his shoulder against the doorframe and watched, and every time Thessa uncovered a new injury, a new bruise, a new cut, his eyes darkened, another shade. "The swelling in the eye will take 3 days, Thessa said to Ilara, tilting her chin gently to examine the socket. "Nothing is torn. It will open on its own." She paused, her fingers hovering near the back of Ilara's neck. "These marks." Ilara knew which marks she meant. The old ones. The scars that crisscrossed the skin at the base of her skull and ran down between her shoulder blades. Thin, deliberate, evenly spaced. Not from fights, from punishment. Kalen had used a willow switch. He called it discipline. The marks had healed white and slightly raised a pattern like tally marks on pale skin. "How old are these?" Thessa asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Years," Ilara said. "Some of them. They are consistent with repeated disciplinary strikes. Someone was thorough. Someone was." From the doorway, the Alpha King's voice came low and even. "What is the name of the beta who sold her?" Kalen, Ilara said. She did not know why she answered so readily. Perhaps because for the first time in her life, someone was asking his name, like it mattered. Like what he had done mattered. "Kalen of Greymore." The king repeated it, the way someone files a blade. Slowly. With purpose. "My enforcer Maran will have a file on the Greymore pack by morning. Their territory disputes have been on my council's desk for 2 seasons. I think it is time I reviewed them personally." Thessa finished her work and left a row of small clay pots on the table beside Ilara, each one labelled in a tight, precise hand. She gave instructions for their use, clear and brief, and then she turned to the king with a look that said, "She needs sleep, not questions." He nodded. Thessa left. They were alone. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the house a door closed. The floorboards above creaked as enforcers moved to their posts. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of the harbour, salt and tar and old fish, mixing with the pine and beeswax of the stronghold. "I cannot be your Luna," Ilara said. The words hung in the air between them. She had meant to say them firmly. They came out bruised. "Why not?" he asked. No challenge in his voice. Genuine curiosity. "Because Lunas are strong. They are from noble bloodlines. They have powerful wolves. They stand beside the king and command respect. I am an orphaned Omega from a minor pack with no wolf, no bloodline, no training, no education. I was sold for 1 silver coin. The fighting pits are the most I have ever been worth to anyone. If you bring me back to your palace and present me as your mate, your court will laugh. Your rivals will use me as proof of weakness. Your pack will reject me." "My pack," he said, uncrossing his arms and straightening from the doorframe, "rejected my father's choice of Luna 20 years ago. She was a noble from the northern reaches, with a wolf so powerful she could shift mid-stride and take down a stag at full run. She was beautiful and pedigreed, and my father's court adored her. She was also cruel, petty, and so consumed with maintaining her position that she poisoned 3 females she considered threats, including my mother. My mother survived. The Luna did not." He took one step into the room. Just one. "I have spent 12 years watching my court try to match me with noble females. Every one of them calculated. Every one of them performed. Not one of them ever made my wolf lift his head." Another step. "My wolf tore through 9 years of silence for you. He broke every wall I built. He screamed your name before I knew it. I do not care about bloodlines, Elara. I care about the fact that my wolf knows what he knows, and he knows you are ours. Ours. Not mine. Ours." The wolf and the man speaking as one. The thing inside Elara's chest pressed so hard she gasped. It was not pain. It was pressure. Like something trying to break through from inside, something massive and ancient that had been locked behind a door she did not know she had. "Something is happening," she whispered, pressing both hands to her sternum. Her heart hammered, her skin flushed hot. I do not know what." He was beside her in 2 strides, not touching. Close enough that his heat enveloped her like a blanket, close enough that his scent cedar smoke and iron and honey-near flame filled her lungs. He knelt. The Alpha King of the Silver Crescent knelt on the floor of a healer's room in front of a battered Omega and looked up at her with eyes that had gone fully bronze. "Let it come," he said. "Whatever it is. Let it come. I am here." She closed her eyes. The pressure built. It was not the strange pulse from the fighting pits. That had been a ripple. This was a tide. It surged up from somewhere deep, somewhere so fundamental that she felt it in her bones, in the marrow, in the spaces between her cells. Her teeth ached. Her skin tingled. The scars on her back burned hot, then cold, then hot again. And then she heard it. Not outside, inside. A voice that was not a voice. A presence that was vast and warm and furious, furious at years of imprisonment, years of silence, years of being told it did not exist. Her wolf. She had a wolf. She had always had a wolf. It was not dormant. It was not missing. It was chained. Somewhere deep inside her, locked behind walls that someone had built deliberately, intentionally, walls made of something that felt like the same oily darkness as Blackroot. Someone had sealed her wolf away. Someone who knew how. Someone who had access to her as a child, before her testing, before the elders declared her wolfless. The realization hit her like ice water. Her eyes flew open. "Someone locked her away," she breathed. "Someone chained my wolf, on purpose." The Alpha King's jaw flexed. His nostrils flared. When he spoke, his voice was a growl layered under words. His wolf and his human voice blended into something that made the fire in the hearth flicker. "Who?" "I do not know. I was a child. I do not remember. Then we will find out." He said it like a promise, like a vow, like an army marching. Elara let out a shuddering breath. Her wolf pressed against the walls of its prison, and she really felt it for the first time, the shape of it. It was large, far larger than any Omega wolf should be. It burned with a heat that matched the king's that resonated with it, two frequencies finding harmony, and its eyes she sensed somehow were gold. Not amber. Gold. The color of a bloodline that had not walked the continent in 200 years. She did not know what that meant yet, but the Alpha King was looking at her with an expression that said he did. Or he suspected. And whatever he suspected had turned his grip on control into something visible, the muscles of his arms rigid, his breathing deliberate. "You need to rest," he said. The words cost him. She could see the effort it took to pull back, to prioritize her body's needs over the storm raging between them. "There is a room prepared. Clean, safe. I will post guards outside. No one enters without your permission, including me. Including you. Including me." He stood. "I have waited 9 years with a silent wolf. I can wait one more night for answers." He walked to the door. Stopped. Did not turn. "Ilara." "Yes, I am glad you survived." Then he was gone, his footsteps heavy on the corridor floor, and Ilara sat alone by the fire, with a wolf howling inside her chest, and the Alpha King's leather coat still warm around her shoulders. She slept. She did not expect to. The bed was wide and soft, dressed in linen that smelled like lavender and clean cotton, and after 11 nights on a cage floor, the sensation of a mattress beneath her was so foreign that she lay rigid for several minutes, her body unable to process the absence of discomfort. But exhaustion won. It always does. She sank into sleep like a stone sinking into dark water, and she dreamed. In the dream she was running. Not in human form. On 4 legs, massive paws, striking frozen ground, a white landscape stretching in every direction. The cold did not touch her. She was the cold. She was winter, given form a wolf so large that her shadow swallowed trees. Her fur was white, tipped with gold, and her eyes were the color of sunlight through amber, and she was not alone. Beside her, matching her stride, ran a black wolf with bronze eyes, and together they carved a path through the snow that steamed behind them. She woke to morning light and the smell of broth. Thessa was in the room, setting a tray on the table by the window. Bone broth, thick and rich, with a heel of dark bread and a small pot of honey. Ilara's stomach cramped at the smell. She had not eaten real food in 11 days. "Small sips," Thessa warned. "Your stomach has shrunk. Too much too fast, and you will be sick." Ilara sipped. The broth was salted and savory, and it spread through her like warm light. She ate slowly, carefully, and Thessa watched with the same flat, professional expression that managed to convey beneath its surface a depth of controlled anger at the state of her. "The king has been awake since before dawn," Thessa said, adjusting the bandage on Ilara's ribs. His enforcer Maren brought him the Greymore pack file. He has been reading it in his study. He has also received word that the fighting pit has been secured by his wolves. All captive fighters have been released and are being processed. Derry has been detained for questioning. Ilara paused mid-sip. Detained? 3 of the wolves in the cages were taken by force, enslaved in violation of Crown law. Derry's claim that all fighters were volunteers was false. Thessa's lips thinned. The king is not pleased. That seemed like an understatement of the same order as saying the ocean was damp. After eating, Ilara was given clothes. Simple but well-made, a soft grey tunic and dark trousers that fit her thin frame loosely, and boots of supple leather that were lined with wool. She dressed slowly, her cracked ribs protesting every movement, and studied herself in the narrow mirror by the window. She barely recognized the person looking back. Gaunt face, one eye still swollen. shut a constellation of bruises across her jaw and cheekbone. The cut above her brow was healing clean, thanks to Thessa's salve, but it would scar. More scars. More tally marks on a body that had been keeping score against her since birth. But her good eye was clear, and behind it something burned that had not been there before. Her wolf, caged within the cage, locked inside the lock, present and furious and waiting. She found the Alpha King in the study. It was a room lined with books and maps, a heavy oak desk dominating the center, and he was behind it, reading a leather-bound file that was thick with documents. He had changed from the previous night. Different shirt, same kind, dark and close-fitted. His hair was damp. The scar on his face caught the morning light. He looked up when she entered. His eyes did the thing again, the darkening, the focus, the intensity that made her feel like she was the only solid object in a world of fog. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." She sat in the chair across from his desk. The leather creaked. Between them the file lay open, and she could see the Greymore pack seal on one of the documents, a grey wolf's head on a dark green field. "I have been reading about your pack," he said. "They are not my pack. They never were. No, they are not. But they were supposed to be, and they failed you, and I find I am having difficulty maintaining a diplomatic perspective about it." He turned a page. "You were brought to the Greymore compound at age 4. No parents on record. The pack registered you as a ward of the Beta's household, which gave Kaelin legal authority over your upbringing. You were tested for wolf presence at 13. The elder who performed the test was a woman named Sorsha." Ilara frowned. "I do not remember her name." Sorsha was not a standard pack elder. She was a spiritual guide, a rare specialist in wolf bond diagnostics. She was brought in specifically for your testing, which is unusual. Standard testing is done by any senior pack member. The Greymore pack paid Sorsha's travel expenses from 2 territories away. He looked at her. Why would a minor pack pay a premium for a specialist to test one orphaned child? The question sat in the air. Ilara felt her wolf shift inside her, a restless motion like an animal pacing. "Unless they already knew what they would find," she said slowly. "Unless they needed someone who could do more than test. Unless they needed someone who could seal." Their eyes met. The word hung between them. Seal. Not test. Seal. "Sorsha died 6 years ago," the king said. "Natural causes according to records. But I have sent Maren to investigate. If someone paid Sorsha to seal your wolf, rather than simply diagnose its absence, there will be a trail. There is always a trail." Ilara's fingernails dug into the arms of the chair. Her wolf pressed harder, a living weight against the walls of its prison. She could feel the chains, now could almost see them in her mind's eye, dark and slick, wrapped around a creature of light. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would anyone chain a wolf inside a child? Because some wolves are dangerous," the king said. "Not to their hosts, to the power structures around them. A wolf of a certain bloodline born in the wrong place could destabilize an entire region simply by existing." He was choosing his words carefully. She could see it in the way his jaw worked, the slight pauses between phrases. "What bloodline?" she asked. "That is what we need to find out, properly, with someone who understands wolf bond seals and how to break them safely." He closed the file. "I have sent word to a scholar at the Royal University, a man named Aldrich who has studied dormant and sealed bonds for 30 years. He can be here in 3 days. 3 days. In the meantime, you are safe here. You are free. You are not a prisoner, not a guest by obligation, not a ward of anyone's household. You are here because I am asking you to stay, and you will stay only as long as you choose to. She studied him. The scar, the amber eyes, the rigid control that held him in his chair when every line of his body said he wanted to be closer. "You are being very careful with me," she said. "Yes. Because of the mate bond. Because you spent the last 6 years being treated like property. I will not add to that by treating you like a prize I have won. You are not a prize, Elara. You are a person. The bond does not change that." Something cracked inside her. Not the wolf. Something more fragile. A wall she had built around the part of herself that still believed kindness was possible. She felt it fracture a hairline break, and warmth leaked through. She didn't cry. She had not cried since she was 9 years old, and Kaelan had told her that crying was the sound of weakness leaving the body, and that she clearly had an infinite supply. She had learned to press everything down, down, until it fossilized in her chest. But the fracture was there now, and she could feel it spreading. "Thank you," she said. It was not enough. No words were enough. But it was what she had. He nodded once. Then he stood, came around the desk and held out his hand, not to grab, to offer. "Would you like to see the grounds? There is a garden. Thessa says fresh air will help the ribs." She took his hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm, enormous around hers. The contact sent a jolt through her arm that settled in her chest like a second heartbeat, and she heard her wolf make a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a sob. They walked. The grounds of the stronghold were larger than she expected, a walled garden with stone paths and winter bare fruit trees, and a small pond that had frozen over at the edges, the center still dark and moving. The air smelled like frost and pine needles and chimney smoke. Their breath came in white clouds. They walked in silence for a while, side by side, not touching, except for the occasional brush of shoulders when the path narrowed. He matched his stride to hers, which was slow and careful on account of the ribs. He did not comment on the pace. He simply walked beside her, as if they had all the time in the world. "Tell me something about yourself," Elara said. "Something that is not in a file." He considered this. "I cannot cook. My enforcers find this hilarious. The Alpha King of the Silver Crescent, feared by every pack on the continent, and I once set fire to a pot of porridge." She laughed. It hurt her ribs, and she did not care. It came out as a rough, startled sound, rusty from disuse, and his head turned toward it with an expression of naked wonder, as if she had just performed a miracle. "Porridge," she said. "How?" "I do not know. It should not be possible. Porridge is water and oats. And yet, she echoed, and the word felt different this time. Not a door closing, a door opening. They stayed in the garden until the cold drove them inside, and then they sat by the fire in the common room, and she told him about her life in the Greymore compound. Not the worst parts. Not yet. The small parts. The way she had learned to identify herbs in the pack kitchen by smell alone, rosemary like warm pine thyme, like a dry summer field, sage like church smoke. The way she had taught herself to read, using a dictionary she had stolen from the Beta's study, 1 page at a time, returning it each morning before anyone noticed it was gone. The way she had once found an injured bird in the garden and nursed it back to health with sugar water and patience, and how it had stayed on her windowsill for a week after it could fly, as if deciding whether she was worth staying for. He listened. He listened the way most people do not, with his whole body leaning slightly forward, his eyes on her face, not interrupting, not offering solutions or judgments, just listening. And she realized with a start that felt like stepping off a ledge, that she wanted him to keep listening, that she wanted to keep talking, that the sound of her own voice, telling her own stories to someone who wanted to hear them, was a kind of oxygen she had been deprived of for so long she had forgotten it existed. 3 days passed. They were strange days, suspended. Like the stronghold existed outside of normal time, a pocket of warmth in the cold geography of her life. Thessa came twice daily to check her injuries, which were healing faster than expected, faster than they should have for a wolfless Omega. The bruises faded from purple to green to yellow. The swelling around her eye receded. Her ribs still ached, but the sharp edge of the pain dulled to a manageable throb. She ate, small meals increasing gradually, and the hollow cavern of her stomach began to fill, and color returned to her skin. She saw the Alpha King Kale every day. He did not push. He did not crowd. He appeared for meals, for walks in the garden, for evenings by the fire. He told her about his kingdom, about the 5 territories, and the delicate web of alliances that held them together. About his enforcer, Maren, the silver-haired woman who had been his right hand since he took the throne at 22, and who was, he said, probably the most dangerous person he had ever met, including himself. About his wolf, who had gone from 9 years of silence to a constant thrumming presence that made it difficult to concentrate on anything that was not Ilara. He told her that last part without embarrassment, without apology, as if it were a weather report. My wolf is obsessed with you. It is raining. On the 2nd day, Maren brought news from the fighting pits. All 23 captive wolves had been released. Medical care had been provided. 12 of them had been fighting voluntarily and would be offered positions in labor programs across the territories. 11 had been enslaved, taken from minor packs through debt schemes and illegal sales. Derry was talking. He is cooperating, Kyle asked, reading Maren's report at the dining table. Maren shrugged. She was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, silver hair catching the light. He is a survivor. He sees which way the wind blows. He has given us names. 4 middlemen who traffic fighters across territory lines. 2 corrupt pack leaders who supply wolves from their own ranks. And... She paused, glanced at Ilara. The Greymore Beta. Kalen. Kyle set the report down. What about him? Derry says Ilara is not the first wolf Kalen has sold. He has been supplying the pits for 3 years. Minor pack members, Omegas, wolves that no one asks about. Maren's voice was flat controlled, the way a blade is controlled. At least 6 confirmed sales, possibly more. The silence that followed was the kind that has teeth. Kyle did not speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was the low, even register that Ilara had learned, meant he was at his most dangerous. Issue an arrest warrant for Kalen of Greymore, trafficking of pack members in violation of the Crown Protection Act. Have him brought here, not to the capital. Here. Maren nodded and left. Ilara sat very still. 6. At least 6 other wolves sold to the pits. She thought of the cages, the smell, the sand, the crowd roaring for blood. She thought of the young female with the black iron collar who had called out, "Please take us too." She thought of the wolves she had fought, the ones with dull eyes and black-root-slowed reflexes, the ones who had been too far gone to be saved by her strange pulse. I should be angrier, she said quietly. I know I should be. But I just feel tired. Kyle reached across the table and placed his hand palm up on the wood between them. An offering. A bridge. She laid her fingers across his palm, and his hand closed gently around hers, and the warmth of it travelled up her arm and settled in the hollow space behind her sternum, where her wolf was slowly waking up. On the third day, Aldrich arrived. He was not what she expected. She had imagined an academic all spectacles and dusty robes. Instead, Aldrich was a compact man in his 60s, with skin the color of dark tea, close-cropped white hair, and the kind of precise economical movements that spoke of a martial background. He carried a leather satchel that clinked with glass vials, and wore a single earring in his left ear, a small silver crescent that marked him as a member of the Royal Scholarly Order. He shook Kyle's hand with the casual familiarity of an old acquaintance. He shook Ilara's hand with both of his, holding it for a moment, his dark eyes studying her face with an intensity that was clinical but not cold. "So," he said, "the king tells me you have a wolf that someone locked away. May I?" He gestured toward her, a request for permission to examine. She nodded. He placed one hand on her shoulder and closed his eyes. The silence stretched. Aldrich's breathing changed. It deepened. His hand on her shoulder grew warm, then hot, and Ilara felt something responding inside her, the chained wolf stirring, reaching toward the warmth like a plant toward light. Aldrich's brow furrowed, then creased. Then his eyes opened, and he withdrew his hand and stepped back, and his expression had changed from clinical curiosity to something that looked a lot like awe. "Well," he said. He looked at Kyle, looked back at Ilara. "Well, well." "Aldrich." The king's voice carried an edge. "The seal is black root-based. Alchemical, not spiritual, which is why the spiritual elders never detected it. It was applied when she was very young, 3 or 4 at most, and it is layered. Multiple applications over time, reinforced as she grew. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were sealing, and they were thorough." He paused. "Thorough and terrified." "Terrified of what?" Ilara asked. Aldrich looked at her with those dark, careful eyes. "Of your wolf, child. Your wolf is not an omega wolf. It is not even a standard alpha wolf. The resonance pattern I felt is consistent with something I have only ever read about in historical texts, something that was supposed to be extinct." The room went very still. "A Solaris wolf," Kyle said. "Not a question." Aldrich nodded slowly. "The Golden Wolves, the old royal bloodline, the one that predates the current 5 territories, the line that was destroyed in the Sundering 200 years ago, or so we believed." Ilara felt as if the floor had tilted. "That is not possible. I am an orphan. I have no family, no bloodline." "Someone went to enormous effort to make sure you believed that," Aldrich said gently. "The seal, the false, testing the placement with a minor pack. This was not neglect, Ilara. This was concealment. Someone knew what you were and chose to bury it." "Can you unseal her?" Kale asked. Aldrich hesitated. "I can begin the process. The seal has been in place for over 2 decades. Removing it all at once would be dangerous, like removing a dam and releasing a flood. It must be done gradually. I can weaken the seal enough that her wolf can begin to emerge naturally, but full unsealing will take weeks, possibly months." "Then begin," Aldrich began. The unsealing happened in the stronghold's largest room, a great hall with high timber ceilings, and a fire that took up half of one wall. Aldrich arranged Ilara on a low cot in the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of crushed herbs and dark powder that smelled like burnt sugar and something metallic. He placed his hands on her temples and began to work. It hurt. Not immediately. At first, there was only warmth spreading from his hands, through her skull, down her spine, into her chest. Then the warmth met the seal, and the seal pushed back, and the collision produced a pain so sharp and bright that Elara arched off the cot and screamed. Kyle was there instantly, not interfering with Aldrich's work. Standing at the edge of the circle, his hands in fists at his sides, his wolf blazing in his eyes, every instinct telling him to rip away whatever was causing his mate pain, and every shred of reason telling him that this pain was necessary. Aldrich worked. The pain came in waves, crest and trough, crest and trough. Each wave eroded the seal a fraction more, and each fraction released a surge of something that felt like sunlight inside her chest. Her wolf pressed against the weakening walls, and with each press, Elara felt more of it. The size, the heat, the power. It was enormous. It was ancient. It was hers. After an hour, Aldrich stopped. He was sweating. His hands trembled. "That is enough for today," he said. "The outer layer is weakened. She should begin to feel her wolf more clearly. The inner layers will require more sessions." Elara lay on the cot, breathing hard. The pain had subsided, leaving behind a warm, humming sensation in her bones. She could feel her wolf more clearly now, as Aldrich had said. Not just a pressure, a shape, a mind. It was aware of her. It was looking at her with eyes she could almost see gold as a sunrise, and it was saying in the language that wolves use, which is not words, but knowing I am here. I have always been here. They could not destroy me. They could only make you forget. She turned her head. Kyle was still standing at the edge of the circle. His face was white. His eyes were molten. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was rough. "I can feel her," Elara said. "My wolf. I can feel her." Something moved across his face. Not relief. Something too raw for that word. He knelt beside the cot slowly, and his hand found hers. And when their fingers interlocked, she felt both wolves respond, his and hers, a resonance that vibrated through the bond like a struck bell. "She is magnificent," he said. "I can feel her through the bond. Even sealed, even chained, she is the strongest wolf I have ever encountered." Elara closed her eyes. Tears leaked from beneath her lashes. Not the tears of weakness that Kaelin had mocked. Tears of something being returned that had been stolen. Over the next 2 days, the seal continued to weaken. Aldrich performed 2 more sessions, each one shorter, each one less painful, the outer layers of the seal crumbling like old mortar. Elara's wolf grew stronger. She could feel it constantly now, a warm presence behind her ribs, and with its awakening came changes. Her senses sharpened. She could smell the lavender in the linen closet 3 rooms away. She could hear the enforcer's footsteps on the floor above, each one distinct, each one identifiable by weight and rhythm. Her body began to heal faster. The cracked ribs stopped hurting. The bruises vanished. The swelling around her eye receded until both eyes were open, dark brown, with flecks of gold that had not been there before. She was becoming something, or becoming herself. The distinction felt unimportant. And then Kaelin arrived. Maren's wolves brought him on the 5th day, shackled in a wagon with iron-reinforced walls. He was delivered to the stronghold's courtyard in the grey light of early morning, and Elara watched from a second-floor window as they pulled him out. He was smaller than she remembered. That was the first thing she noticed. In her memory, Kaelin loomed. He was the largest figure in her childhood, the shadow over every doorway, the voice behind every punishment. But standing in the courtyard in shackles, surrounded by royal enforcers who dwarfed him, he looked ordinary. A mid-40s beta with thinning brown hair and a paunch that strained his shirt and small, mean eyes that darted left and right looking for advantage. His eyes found the window, found her. His face changed. Not fear, exactly, something more complex. He had the expression of a man who has been carrying a secret for a very long time and has just realized it is about to be dragged into the light. Kyle held the hearing in the great hall. Not a trial, not yet. That would come later in the capital, with the full weight of the Crown's judiciary. This was a hearing, a formal inquiry, and the king presided from a high-backed chair that had the look of a throne without technically being one. Ilara sat to his left. Aldrich stood to his right. Maren and 4 enforcers lined the walls. Kaelan was brought in. He walked with the careful posture of a man trying to project dignity while wearing iron shackles. He stopped before the king's chair and stood with his chin raised. And for a moment, just a moment, Ilara saw something she had never expected to see in him. Exhaustion. Not the kind that comes from travel, the kind that comes from years, from decades. He looked in that unguarded moment before he assembled his defenses like a man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and was in some buried part of himself almost relieved that someone was about to take it away. The moment passed. His jaw tightened. His eyes hardened. "Kaelan of the Greymore Pack," Kyle said. "You stand accused of trafficking pack members to illegal fighting operations in violation of the Crown Protection Act. At least 6 wolves sold over 3 years. One of them is sitting beside me." Kaelan's eyes flicked to Ilara. She is an Omega. Wolfless. A burden on pack resources. The Pack Council approved her transfer. Her transfer? You mean her sale for 1 silver coin? A voluntary rehoming? The records are clear. The records are fabricated. Your pack's archivist has already confirmed under separate questioning that the council approval was forged. You acted alone. Kyle's voice was ice on stone. But that is for the Crown Court to determine. I have a different question for you, Kaelan. One that may determine whether you face trafficking charges alone or something far worse. He leaned forward. Who sealed her wolf? The color drained from Kaelan's face. All of it. He went from ruddy to grey in the space of a single heartbeat. His mouth opened, closed. His hands trembled in their shackles. I do not know what you are talking about. You do. You have known what she is since the day she was brought to your compound at 4 years old. You knew because you were told. Someone placed her with you, specifically because you were a minor pack beneath notice, and because you were willing to keep her contained. You paid Sorsha to seal the wolf, not to test for one. You maintained the concealment for 20 years. Kyle's eyes burned. Who gave the order? Kaelan was silent for a long, terrible moment. The exhaustion was back. It leaked through the cracks in his composure like water through old stone. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than Ilara had ever heard it. Her father. The word dropped into the room like a stone into a still pond. Ripples of shock expanded outward. Aldrich straightened. Maren's hand went to her blade. Kyle did not move. Her father, Kyle repeated. He brought her to me. 22 years ago. A man I had never met. He was dying, poisoned, I think, something slow-acting that was eating him from the inside. He could barely stand. He had the child in his arms and he begged me. He said she had to be hidden. That if anyone discovered what she was, they would kill her the way they had killed her mother, the way they were killing him. He said to seal the wolf, bury the bloodline, let her live as nothing rather than die as something. Kaelan swallowed. He offered me gold, a chest of it, enough to lift the Greymore Pack from poverty for a generation, and he told me her wolf was Solaris, the last Solaris wolf on the continent. Silence. I was afraid, Kaelan said, and the admission seemed to cost him something physical. His shoulders sagged. Not at first. At first it was just business. Take the child, take the gold hire, Sorsha, seal the wolf. Simple. But as she grew, I felt it. Even sealed, her presence was heavy. Wolves in the compound would gravitate toward her. Fights would stop when she entered a room. Animals followed her. The earth smelled different where she walked. I was a beta. My authority depended on dominance, and every day she existed in my compound, I felt my dominance eroding. Not because she did anything, just because she was. He looked at Ilara, really looked at her, and for a fraction of a second, beneath the meanness and the fear and the exhaustion, there was something that might, in a different man, have been regret. The punishments were not just cruelty, he said. They were reinforcement. Sorsha said the seal weakened when the host felt safe, felt loved, felt powerful. To keep the seal intact, the host had to be kept small, afraid, broken. His voice dropped to a whisper. I made her small to keep us all alive. The room was very quiet. Ilara sat with her hands in her lap and felt the world rearrange itself. Not around a new truth, because the truth was not new. The truth was old. The truth was that she had been broken on purpose by design, and the man who had done it was standing in front of her, admitting that he had known exactly what he was doing, and his reason, his justification, was fear. She waited for the anger. It did not come. Not the hot, righteous fury she had always imagined she would feel if this moment ever arrived. Instead, there was something colder. Something that crystallized in her chest like ice, forming on still water. Clarity. "You could have told me," she said. Her voice did not waver. "At any point in 20 years, you could have told me who I was, what I was, and let me choose for myself. Instead, you made the choice for me. You chose smallness. You chose fear. And you told yourself it was protection." Kaelin flinched. "You were a child," he said. "What choice could a child make? I grew up. I stopped being a child, and you kept choosing for me. You kept the willow switch. You kept the scars. You sold me to a fighting pit for 1 silver coin." She paused. "You did not sell me because I was worthless, Kaelin. You sold me because, after 20 years of trying to keep me small, you realized it was not working. The seal was weakening. My wolf was waking. And you panicked." His silence was confirmation. Kyle spoke. "You will be transferred to the capital. The trafficking charges will be adjudicated by the Crown Court. The charge of conspiracy to conceal a royal bloodline will be investigated separately." He paused. "The gold. The chest her father gave you. Where is it? Spent. Years ago, the pack needed it. We were starving." Kyle nodded to Maren, who gestured to the enforcers. They took Kaelin by the arms and led him toward the door. As he passed Ilara, he stopped. The enforcers tensed. He did not struggle. He simply stopped and looked at her with those small, mean eyes that were for this one moment not mean at all. "Your father loved you," he said. "Whatever else you believe about what I did, believe that. He was dying, and he brought you to the safest place he could find, and he loved you enough to give up everything to keep you alive." The enforcers led him out. The door closed. Ilara breathed. Kyle was beside her. Not touching, not speaking, just present. A warmth at her left side, a steadiness. She reached for his hand blindly, and he gave it, and she held it, and breathed until the crystalline clarity in her chest softened enough for her to feel again. She had a father, she said. I had a father. You had a father who loved you, and enemies who killed him for what he was, what you are. The Solaris line, the Golden Wolves, who killed them. The sundering was 200 years ago. The historical record says the 5 territory pacts united to destroy the Solaris Wolves because their power threatened the balance. The real record, the one that exists in sealed archives that only the Crown can access, says it was not all 5 packs. It was one, the Black Mere Pack. They orchestrated the genocide and convinced the others to participate. Black Mere. They still exist. Their territory is in the Eastern Mountains. Their current alpha is a man named Riven, who has spent the last decade building military strength and making aggressive moves on neighboring territories. Kyle's grip on her hand tightened. If he learns that a Solaris wolf has survived, he will come for you. Not because you threaten him now, because of what you represent. The Solaris Wolves were the original unifying bloodline. The other packs followed them, not because of force, but because of something in the wolf itself, a resonance that made other wolves want to follow. It is what you did in the fighting pits, Ilara. When you pacified those feral wolves with your touch, that was not a trick. That was the Solaris gift, the ability to reach into another wolf and quiet the storm. The weight of it settled onto her. Not all at once, in layers, like snow falling. "What do I do?" she asked. He turned to face her. His free hand came up and cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing the fading bruise on her cheekbone, gentle as a breath. "You do whatever you choose," he said. "You are not a weapon. You are not a symbol. You are not a tool for my kingdom, or a threat to Riven's. You are Ilara. And for the first time in your life, no one gets to choose for you." She searched his face, the scar, the amber eyes. The rigid control that she was beginning to understand was not coldness, but restraint, a man holding himself in check because he understood that power without restraint was just another cage. "What if I choose to stay?" she said. His eyes blazed, not the bronze of anger. Gold, pure gold, his wolf, surging to the surface. And for a heartbeat, she could see it, the massive black wolf behind those eyes, the beast that had been silent for 9 years, and was now roaring with the force of a hurricane held in check by a single thread. "Then you stay," he said, "as my mate, as my equal, as the Luna of the Silver Crescent. Not because I claim you, but because you claim me." The thread held. Barely. Ilara leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. His heartbeat was wild under his ribs. His arms came around her slowly, carefully, as if she were made of glass, as if the restraint was costing him everything. His chin rested on top of her head. He smelled like cedar smoke and iron and that warm, sweet note underneath, and she breathed it in and felt her wolf unfurl another inch behind her ribs. "I claim you," she whispered. His arms tightened. His wolf roared. She felt it through the bond, a sound so vast and primal it made the windows rattle. His control cracked, not violently, like sunrise cracking the horizon. His lips pressed against her hair, her temple, her brow, and his voice, when it came, was no longer low and measured. It was raw. "Mine. You are mine, and I am yours, and nothing on this continent will change that." She lifted her head. Their eyes met. Gold and bronze Solaris, and Silver Crescent, 2 wolves, recognizing each other across the wreckage of centuries. And then she felt it. The seal broke. Not because of Aldrich's careful work, not because of gradual weakening, because something about this moment, this claiming this choice, made freely for the first time in her life, struck the final wall like a hammer. Her wolf erupted from its prison with a force that buckled her knees and flooded her veins with liquid sunlight. She gasped. She burned. Her skin prickled, and her bones shifted, and for one terrifying, exhilarating moment, she was neither human nor wolf, but both suspended in the space between. Kyle caught her, held her. His wolf met hers through the bond and anchored it, a black counterweight to the golden storm, and the resonance between them, the thing that Aldrich had called a Solaris gift, rang out through the stronghold like a bell. Every wolf in the building felt it. In their rooms the enforcers dropped to their knees. In the courtyard the horses reared. In the kitchen a pot of water boiled over. In the great hall the fire surged flames, leaping 3 feet above the mantel, casting the room in gold. Ilara opened her eyes, both eyes, clear, sharp, awash with golden light. "There you are," Kyle breathed. The days that followed were a reckoning. News travelled fast. The Alpha King's mate, a Solaris wolf, the last golden bloodline. It moved through the territories like wildfire carried by rumour and messenger, and the undeniable resonance that every wolf within 100 miles could feel a new frequency in the bond web that connected all wolves, a note that had been missing for 200 years. Maren reported that the Black Mare Pack was mobilizing. Riven had recalled his wolves from border patrols and was consolidating forces in his mountain stronghold. He had sent no message, made no formal declaration, but the movement spoke louder than any words. "He will come," Kyle said. They were in his study maps, spread across the desk markers, indicating troop positions and territory boundaries. Not immediately. He will wait, gather intelligence, look for weakness, but he will come. Ilara stood at the window. The garden below was dusted with new snow, and the morning sun turned it gold. Her reflection in the glass was strange to her. Still gaunt, still scarred, but different. Her eyes held a light that was not reflected from outside. Her wolf sat behind them, alert, present, a constant companion for the first time in her life. She had not fully shifted yet. Aldrich said the inner layers of the seal were still dissolving, that her wolf needed time to fully integrate. But even partial freedom had transformed her. Her senses were supernatural. She could hear a conversation in the courtyard from 3 floors up. She could smell the individual herbs in the kitchen garden under the snow, and the Solaris gift, the pulse that had saved her in the fighting pits, was now under her control. She could feel the wolves around her, each one a distinct note in a vast symphony, and she could reach out with her mind and touch those notes, calm them, steady them. "Let him come," she said. Kyle looked up from the map. "You are not ready for a war." "No, but I am not going to hide again. I spent 20 years in a cage someone else built. I will not build a new one." His mouth twitched, that almost smile that was only for her. "I was going to suggest a strategic retreat to the capital. And I am suggesting that we stop retreating. You are the Alpha King. I am apparently the last of a bloodline that terrified an entire pack into genocide. If Riven wants a fight, make him fight on our terms, not his." Maren, leaning in her customary position against the wall, raised an eyebrow. "I like her." Kyle's almost smile became an actual smile. It transformed his face. The scar, the hard angles, the severity, all of it softened, and for a moment he looked like what he was beneath the crown, a man in his 30s who had been alone too long, finding his way back to himself through someone else. "Very well," he said. "We stay, and we prepare." They prepared. Enforcers poured into Holven over the next 3 days. Kyle's standing force, 500 strong, arrived by ship and overland, setting up a perimeter around the city. The Port Authority, nervous about a military presence, was reassured by the Crown's treasury, which quietly underwrote the cost of hosting a small army. Halvan had never been a military city. Now it bristled with Silver Crescent wolves. Aldrich continued the unsealing. Each session brought more of Ilara's wolf to the surface. The inner layers were stubborn, anchored deep in her psyche, but they were cracking. And with each crack her power grew. On the 7th day, she pacified a sparring match between two enforcers from 30 feet away, both wolves dropping mid-lunge into docile, blinking confusion. On the 9th day, she felt every wolf in the stronghold simultaneously, all 42 of them, each one a distinct pulse that she could name without looking. On the 11th day, she stood in the garden and reached out to a wolf she had never met a scout running patrol 3 miles away, and calmed his anxiety about a suspicious scent near the eastern road. The scout had come to the stronghold that evening, visibly shaken, and asked to meet her. He was a young wolf named Tam, barely 20, with nervous eyes and hands that could not stay still. "I felt you," he said, "in my head. Not like a command, not like the Alpha's authority. Like," he struggled for words, "like someone pulling a blanket over me. Warm, safe. I have never felt anything like it." Ilara felt a pang of something she could not name. Responsibility, perhaps, or the weight of a gift she had not asked for. "I am sorry if it frightened you," she said. "It didn't frighten me." He looked at her with an expression that was close to reverence. It felt like home. He was the first. He was not the last. Over the days that followed, wolves sought her out. Not just Silver Crescent wolves, others, strays. Lone wolves who had felt the resonance and followed it to Halvan, a former Greymore Omega who had escaped Kaelin's trafficking pipeline, a Blackmere deserter who had refused an order to attack a civilian settlement, a pair of siblings from the northern reaches who had been expelled from their pack for questioning their alpha's cruelty. They came to her, not to Kael, to her. "This is the Solaris gift," Aldrich told her one evening, watching from the study window, as a group of newly arrived wolves sat in the courtyard, sharing food and warmth. This is what the old texts describe. The golden wolves did not rule through force. They ruled through pull. Other wolves wanted to follow them. Not because of dominance, because of resonance. They made the pack feel like a pack. "I am not ruling anyone," Ilara said. "No, you are doing something better. You are gathering them." The morning Riven came was quiet. Too quiet. The harbour sounds that normally drifted up to the stronghold, the creak of ships, the shouts of dock workers, the clatter of carts were absent. Maren noticed first. She was in the courtyard, checking a weapons shipment, and she paused, tilted her head, and then moved with the swift, economical urgency that meant danger. "Perimeter wolves are not reporting in," she told Kyle. "Eastern and southern sectors. 7 wolves, silent for over an hour." Kyle was on his feet before she finished speaking. Ilara felt it, at the same time, a disturbance in the web of wolf presences she had come to think of as her second sight. The 7 missing wolves were not dead. She could still feel them faintly, but their signals were muffled, as if something was dampening their presence. "Black root," she said. "They have been drugged. Someone hit them with black root to suppress their bond signals." Maren stared at her. "You can feel that. I can feel all of it. The whole web. And something is pressing against the edges. Something large. A lot of wolves, moving in from the east." Kyle barked orders. Enforcers scrambled. Horns sounded. The stronghold, which had been a place of healing and growing and gathering for 2 weeks, became in the space of minutes what it had always been built to be, a fortress. Riven announced himself by walking through the main gate of the stronghold alone, unarmed, with his hands clasped behind his back. He was older than Cole, mid-40s, with iron-grey hair and a face that was all sharp edges and no warmth. His eyes were black, not dark brown. Black like coal, like the void between stars. He wore military dress black and deep red, and he carried himself with the rigid posture of a man who has never doubted his own authority. He stopped in the courtyard. Enforcers surrounded him, blades drawn. He ignored them. "Alpha King," he said. His voice was smooth, polished, the voice of a man who had practiced command until it was indistinguishable from his natural speech. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Kyle descended the stronghold steps. He was in full battle readiness, dark armor over dark leather, and the scar on his face was white against skin, flushed with contained rage. His wolf was visible in his eyes, bronze fire, and the authority he radiated pressed down on the courtyard like a physical force. "Nothing in this stronghold belongs to you, Riven." The Solaris wolf. Riven's eyes slid past Kale to the stronghold entrance, where Elara stood with Aldrich and Maren. 200 years and the bloodline refuses to die. Tenacious. Annoying. But ultimately irrelevant. He returned his gaze to Kyle. "I did not come to fight, though I certainly can. I brought 300 wolves. They are surrounding this city as we speak. I came to negotiate. You drugged my patrol wolves and surrounded my position. That is not a negotiation. That is siege. Semantics. I want the Solaris female, not to kill. I am not my ancestors. I want her sealed again, permanently, and returned to obscurity. The Solaris bloodline is a relic, an anachronism. The 5 territories have been stable for 2 centuries without a golden wolf, and they will remain stable for 2 more. Her existence upsets a balance that does not need upsetting." Kyle took 1 step toward Riven. The enforcers shifted a choreographed tension, hands tightening on hilts. "She is my mate." Riven blinked. For the first time, something other than calculation crossed his face. Surprise. Genuine surprise, followed immediately by something that looked impossibly like pity. "Then I am sorry for you," Riven said. "Truly. Because this will not end well for either of you if you refuse." "Is that a threat?" "It is a prediction. The Solaris gift destabilizes pack hierarchies. Every wolf within range feels the pull. Your own enforcers will begin to follow her instead of you. Your alliances will fracture as other alphas feel their wolves respond to her resonance. Within a year, the 5 territories will be in chaos. Not because she is evil, because she cannot help what she is." The words landed. Elara felt them land, because Kale's bond with her transmitted a spike of something, not doubt, not agreement, but the recognition that Riven was not entirely wrong. The Solaris gift was powerful. It was already pulling wolves to Halvan. It was already shifting the dynamic within the Silver Crescent pack. Wolves looked to her, deferred to her, sought her out. Not because she asked them to, because the resonance was involuntary, a gravitational pull encoded in the wolf itself. But Riven was wrong about one thing. He assumed the gift was uncontrollable, a force of nature, a flood that could only be dammed or unleashed. He had not seen what she could do. Elara stepped forward, past Aldrich, past Maren, who moved to block her, and then stopped because the look on Elara's face was not the look of a woman walking into danger. It was the look of a woman walking into herself. She descended the stronghold steps. The courtyard went silent. Every wolf present, Silver Crescent and Blackmere alike, felt the resonance shift as she moved a gravitational center, relocating. She stopped 3 feet from Riven. He was taller than her, broader. His black eyes looked down at her, with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and contempt. Up close, she could smell him. Cold stone and iron rust, and underneath the faintest trace of something unexpected. Fear. Not of her, of what she represented, of the chaos he genuinely believed she would bring. He was not a monster, she realized. He was a man terrified of the future, trying to control it, the only way he knew how, by destroying anything that might change it. "Alpha Riven," she said. Her voice was steady, clear. The voice of a woman who had been silenced for 20 years and had just learned the full range of her own volume. "Your ancestors destroyed my bloodline because they feared what it could do. You are here for the same reason. Fear. Not strategy, not balance. Fear." His jaw tightened. "You know nothing about me. I know that you recalled your wolves from border patrols to come here. That means your territories are unguarded. That means you considered this more important than defending your own people. A man who leaves his borders exposed to chase a single wolf is not acting from logic. He is acting from fear." A muscle in his cheek twitched. The same tell as Kyle's, she noted distantly. The same unconscious reveal of emotion in men who prided themselves on control. "And I know," she continued, "that you brought 300 wolves to surround a city because you believe 300 wolves are enough. They are not." She reached out, not with her hands, with the gift. The Solaris resonance expanded from her chest in a wave, silent, invisible, but felt by every wolf in the courtyard, in the stronghold, in the streets of Halvan, in the perimeter positions ringing the city. It rolled outward like a tide, and every wolf it touched felt the same thing. Calm, not submission, not dominance, not the crushing weight of an alpha's authority. Calm, the kind of deep bone-level peace that a wolf feels when it is surrounded by pack, by family, by the certainty of belonging. The kind of peace that makes violence feel not just unnecessary, but absurd. Riven's wolves felt it first. The 300 surrounding the city tense and battle-ready experienced a wave of calm that unraveled their aggression like thread pulled from a seam. They didn't lay down their weapons. They didn't defect. They simply relaxed. The killing edge dulled. The berserker readiness that Blackmere wolves were famous for softened into something merely alert. In the courtyard, Riven staggered. His black eyes widened. She saw the moment it hit him, the resonance passing through his own wolf like warm water through ice, and for one unguarded second, the terror behind his eyes was naked. Then his wolf did something she did not expect. It knelt. Not Riven. Riven stood rigid, fighting it. His jaw clenched so hard she could hear his teeth grinding. But his wolf, the beast inside him that operated on instinct deeper than thought, recognized the Solaris resonance and responded with the only appropriate response: submission. Not the defeated submission of a conquered enemy, the willing submission of a wolf recognizing its elder, its leader, its golden light. Riven's knees buckled. He caught himself, one hand slamming to the cobblestones, and he snarled, actually snarled, teeth bared, fighting his own wolf for control of his body. Elara pulled the resonance back, gently, like lowering a volume dial. She did not want him on his knees. She wanted him to understand. "The Solaris gift is not a weapon," she said. "It is not a flood. It is not chaos. It is what wolves were before we forgot. Before territory lines and dominance fights and sealed bloodlines, we were pack, all of us. One pack. And the golden wolves were the ones who reminded us. Riven raised his head. His face was ashen, sweat beaded on his forehead. His black eyes held something she had never seen in them before. Doubt. "If I let you live," he said, his voice hoarse, "everything changes." "Everything has already changed," she said. "You felt it. Your wolves felt it. The question is not whether the world changes. The question is whether you change with it or break against it." He stared at her. The courtyard was silent. Then Riven stood. Slowly. He straightened his jacket, wiped the sweat from his brow, looked at Kyle, who was standing 4 feet away with murder in his eyes and restraint in his locked fists. "Your mate," Riven said, "is terrifying." "Yes," Kyle said. "She is." Riven looked back at Elara. The doubt was still there, but something else had joined it. Not acceptance. Not yet. But the first hairline fracture of a world-view that had been rigid for 40 years. "I will withdraw my wolves," he said. "But this is not over. The other territories will have opinions. The balance will shift. There will be those who see you as a threat, regardless of your intentions." "There always are," Elara said. Riven held her gaze for one more moment. Then he turned, walked to the courtyard gate, and did not look back. The withdrawal took 3 hours. Maren monitored every movement, every black mare wolf pulling back from the perimeter, every ship departing the harbour. By late afternoon, Halvan was clear. The drugged patrol wolves were found groggy, but unharmed, and brought in for medical attention. The stronghold exhaled. Elara stood in the garden as the sun set. The snow was melting, patches of dark earth showing through, and the air smelled like wet stone, and the first faint promise of spring, still weeks away, but present a ghost of warmth in the breeze. Kyle found her there. He came up behind her close, but not touching, and stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at the same sky. "You did not need me to rescue you," he said. "No. I bought an entire arena for a woman who did not need rescuing. You bought an arena for a woman in a cage who did not yet know she could break her own bars. That is not the same thing." He was quiet for a moment. "No, it is not." They stood together. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in bands of gold and amber and deep violet. In the stronghold behind them, wolves were gathering for the evening meal, and the sound of their voices, low murmur and occasional laughter, drifted through the open windows. "The marking ceremony," Elara said, "the formal claiming." "When?" He turned to look at her. The gold light caught the scar on his face, turning it luminous. "Whenever you want. Tonight." His breath caught. Just slightly. A fractional hitch that someone who was not listening with wolf-sharp ears would have missed. "Tonight," he repeated. "I have spent 20 years with someone else's chains on me. I am done waiting. I choose you. I choose this. Tonight." His hand found hers, warm, rough, certain. The ceremony was simple, not the elaborate state affair that the Silver Crescent Court would eventually demand, the formal presentation, the political theatre. That would come later. This was the real ceremony, the wolf ceremony, the one that mattered. They stood in the great hall, fire burning, Aldrich as witness, Maren as witness, Thessa, who had stitched Elara's wounds and fed her broth and watched her become something that neither of them had expected, a handful of wolves who had gathered in Holvan strays and seekers who had followed the resonance to its source. Kyle spoke the old words. the ones that predated the 5 territories, the ones that wolves had spoken to each other since the first bonded pair ran together under the first moon. I offer you my wolf. I offer you my throat. I offer you every hunt, every howl, every dawn, from this breath until my last breath. My teeth are your shield. My blood is your blood. I am Pack. Ilara spoke them back. He tilted his head, baring the side of his neck. She leaned up, standing on her toes to reach, and placed her teeth against his skin. Not a bite. Not yet. A promise. The press of enamel against the pulse point where his heartbeat pounded strongest. Then she bit. Not hard enough to truly wound. Hard enough to mark. Hard enough that her teeth broke the skin and her blood mixed with his, and the bond between them which had been humming since the moment their eyes met through the bars of a cage detonated. It was not like anything she could have imagined. Not a feeling. An event. A tectonic shift in the geography of her soul. She felt him. All of him. Not just his emotions. Not just his wolf, but the architecture of the man. The loneliness of 9 years without a wolf voice. The weight of a crown he had never wanted, but carried anyway. The fear he masked as control. The tenderness he had shown her in the garden when he matched his stride to hers and walked slowly because her ribs hurt. He felt her too. She knew because a sound escaped him, low and broken and reverent, and his hands came up to cradle her face, and when she released his neck and looked up at him, his eyes were wet. He tilted his head the other way, offering the other side of his throat. And she understood. Symmetry. Both sides. A double mark. She had never heard of a double marking, but it felt right, it felt necessary. And when her teeth found his skin again, the bond pulsed so powerfully that the fire in the hearth turned gold, and every wolf in the room felt their own bonds stir in sympathy. Then it was her turn. She tilted her head, baring her neck, and his mouth found the curve between her shoulder and her throat. His teeth were larger than hers. The pressure was careful, measured a predator's jaw, calibrated to mark without maiming. When he bit down, the pain was sharp and sweet and immediate, and it was followed by a rush of warmth that flooded her entire body. The mark burned as it formed, not the burn of injury, the burn of belonging. When he lifted his head, the hall was silent. The fire crackled. Someone she thought it might have been Tam, the young scout, let out a shaking breath. Kyle pressed his forehead against hers. Their wolves, black and gold, stood facing each other in the shared space of the bond, and for the first time in her life, Ilara's wolf was not chained, not sealed, not hidden. It stood in the open, radiant, massive, golden as a dawn, and it was met by a wolf, equally vast, equally fierce, and they pressed their muzzles together. "I am Puck," Ilara whispered. "You are Puck," Kyle said. "You are Luna. You are mine, and I am yours. And the world will learn to live with that." Outside the stronghold, the last light of sunset faded from the sky, and in the garden where the snow was melting, a single green shoot pushed through the dark earth, improbable and small and stubbornly alive. Aldrich saw it the next morning. He knelt beside it, examined the tiny leaf, and stood with an expression that was somewhere between wonder and resignation. "Gold vine," he said. "It has not grown on this continent in 2 centuries. It only grows where a Solaris wolf walks." Maren, passing behind him with a stack of reports, paused. She looked at the shoot. She looked at the stronghold where Ilara was visible in a window, standing in the morning light, her hand resting against the glass. "Well," Maren said, "I suppose we had better get used to it." She walked on. Aldrich stood a moment longer. Then he laughed, soft and private, and followed her inside, leaving the gold vine to grow in the pale, persistent light of a new morning.